Welcome back, baseball fans. The 1974-77 Carryover League off-season look. And this week, we begin looking at the Carryon process. Teams who have players on the Carryon list. We'll look at that first. We know we have 12 players per the 32 teams in the league who'll be carrying on in a year. 6 and 74, 4 and 75, and 2 and 76. Of course, they're protecting 4, and then there's 4 unknowns that they draft. They've waived 2, retired 2. And in this process, we're examining what happens if a player actually gets better in one of the 4 years. So let's examine for a moment the other. We know a team has 4 guys they want to keep. And they could draft a player who was with them a year ago with their 73 card into either 74, 5, 6, or 7. And those 4 players will generally be 4 of the top 8 draft picks, leaving guys who are rookies or free agents to fill the other 4 spots where you put guys on waivers or retirement list. But there is another option, and that is to take a player and see if he's better in a different year, and in that moment of the draft, make that selection. Then actually the player's technically on the roster twice, but basically the older card or the previous card you vacate, and then you got to fill the year later after the draft's over in undrafted free agency. Case in point of this, where it worked really well many years ago, it was a case of the Dodgers. The Dodgers had Don Sutton and Jim Brewer on their 71 cards active, and they decided that they wanted to simply move them into their 72 cards, which were the best cards of their careers. So what they're doing is they're taking the ceiling of their team and raising that to make Sutton and Brewer the top 2 players on their team, but vacating 2 spots for later in the draft to fill up the 19th and 20th roster spot. They did that by taking, in the year of 71, a very young Steve Garvey and a very young Joe Ferguson. Both cards hit around 200, weren't very good. They were just utility players, though. So the gamble was that Sutton and Brewer would dominate and help them win games, while Garvey and Ferguson and their inferior cards were not going to lose games for them. So that's the strategy when you go about carrying on a player and what you're thinking of doing. The other aspect is in the draft, you have to take a player from 74, 5, 6, and 7, 1 per year in any order in the first 4 rounds in the draft. And then in the 5th round is dedicated to year 4, which this year it's 77. The 6th year, the 3rd year, the 7th, and the 8th rounds are dedicated to those years. In looking at the available players, you might not find a guy out there you like in one of the years that you have to pick in. So then you can go back to a carry-on player and go, maybe I can just move a player into that year that everything else looks kind of cold. Let me move a player into that year, and then I can find better stuff in the year he vacates, more talent in the year he vacates. So that's the theory that goes into this process of making the teams better, the league more competitive. And so tonight we're going to do this 4 parts in the next 4 weeks. We're going to look at 8 teams per night, and we're going to do it in the alphabetical abbreviation of the team name, beginning with Arizona. And we'll take it through the first 8 teams. And this is the players who are moving forward, their team, the year, and the number player per year. And the reason we start at 3 here is that 0, 1, and 0, 2 will be in the draft. Same here, 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 1, 0, 2, and 77 will be 0, 1, 0, 2. That's why we start with 3 there. I keep the defenses here for my reference. And over here, what I do is I highlight if I think a player is better in a different year. That's the point of the analysis. So column 1 in 74, that's blank, corresponding to this year here. 75 is left blank, corresponding to that. 76 is blank. And of course, 77 is an evaluation for all players. So with that, we begin with Arizona. And after looking closely at Arizona, there's only one player who has a better card, and that is Ed Herman. Let's take a look at Ed Herman and see if if it's worth a draft pick to get him into a 77 card. So we got a 75 card. Interestingly, he's a all-star in 74, but we got a 75 card with a little more pop in it. But we're saying in 77 with Houston, he's now hitting 291 with a 707 OPS. So they're going for batting average and on base and losing a little bit of slugging in 77. It might come down to what the defense looks like. It might come down to simply they prefer, they don't see anything good happening in 77, and they like to find another talent in the year of 75. That's an option. So that's the only leverage they have here in the carry-on process, is moving Ed Herman in the 77. All right, the next team is Atlanta. Now, the first player is very unique. It's Enos Cabell. So this is an interesting case here. They added him in 74 because they simply needed defense at first base, even though he wasn't very good at all, frankly, in 74th Baltimore. He hit 241, 608 OPS. The good news is, as a futures bet, he would move to Houston and provide decent years, his best being 77, where he hit 16 home runs. Houston at first base has Bob Watson. They even didn't even want Lee May, who they got in the Joe Morgan trade. They shipped him to Baltimore. So Watson's at first. Third base is Doug Rader presently. So the Houston Astros don't really have a home for him right now. So it was a smart move for Atlanta to get him early. How long he stays with Atlanta, who he's never been associated with, remains to be seen. But the 77 year and the two previous, 77 being the best one, and we could even highlight again here with a little bit more information if we want, indicate that 77 he's got a 751 OPS. So it's interesting that a player would have three better options. And you're wondering, well, why didn't they take Cabell in one of those two options a year ago? Well, they probably had a space open in 74, didn't have space available in 5 or 6, is the usual reason. The other player who has value, and this is a slight improvement, is Rico Carty. He's moved to a designated hitter by now in the American League, stays with Cleveland and Oakland. So we have his 75 card, which has been very good, by the way. You see 308, 882. In 76, he's on the MVP list, and it's kind of a sideways move, really, but he's on the MVP list. 77, it's more slugging. 78 is out of the timeline, and that's where he has the 31 homers and the 850 OPS. So, if anything, it's a sideways move, but you're giving him a contract extension is what you're doing in this case. You're tacking on a year, meaning that you don't have to touch Carty for 2 more seasons. That's another reason to do it as well. Just push a guy into the future by extending his contract. So that has value as well. Not a lot of value if it's just going to be 1 year, but again, if they were stuck in the year of 76 and 77, they could go Cabell and Carty. instead of being forced to pick someone inferior. All right, next up is Baltimore. Talented group of players who are probably in their best years. Blair's in the last good year of his career. Gritz is going to be in his last good year in Baltimore. By 77, he gets traded to California, gets injured in the off season. They move him to shortstop. He struggles, and he doesn't start turning it on for the Angels until 1979, when he has a monster year. Brooks Robinson's last good year is 74. Same with Cuellar. Now the younger players have nice futures. Doug DeCinces, let's take a look at him. He pretty much wins over the third base job from Brooks Robinson by 77, and 78 is his best year in Baltimore. So 77 is pretty good for DeCinces. It's 19 homers, a 772 OPS, a 4.5 WAR. If you wait a year, 78, it's a 6.8 WAR, and he hits 28 home runs, 872. So that's the card you want to get. You can't get it in one off season. So you can hold with a 75 card one more year and then just improve him next year. Or you can make year-to-year improvements with the Senseis. Go to 77 and then to 78. Timmy Martinez has a modest improvement from 75 to 76. And then he kind of struggles a little bit with the Orioles for having a good 79. 76, here he is, with a 2.33 ERA, and in 77 it's 2.70. But the whip is kind of high. He's walking guys, and 78's kind of forgettable. But then 79, he established himself as a good quality setup guy. Never was a lights-out closer until their World Series year of 83. You see only 10 and 11, you know, but the 21 saves in 83, they won the World Series. He threw 103 innings. That was his best season. So DeCinces and Timmy Martinez are the only guys. Belanger, Garland are in their best year, as is Jim Palmer. Next up, the Red Sox. Now, interesting case with the Red Sox. They're trying to get their 75 World Series team together. And they could do a lot of moves. Oddly enough, not much with the 75 year. Only one player, and he's not even a Red Sox. Mike Cosgrove, I'm not even going to show it. It's just a modest. The ERA gets lower, the whip gets higher. But there's four fundamental Bo Sox in 76 and 77 who all get better. Burleson and Tiant in 76. Dwight Evans and Jim Rice in 77. Let's take each case. Let's go to Burleson. Burleson's 76 season. He hits 291 with a 748 OPS. That would be the best numbers in Boston. He wins a Gold Glove in 79 with Boston. He also steals 14 bases with that 291 average. So I think the key with Burleson is making sure he's got stellar defense first and then get the batting average second. Another guy in 76, and this is pretty much only because he struggled so much, is Louis Tiant. Tiant really struggled with a 74 card. I have no idea why. It's a 7.7 WAR, 2.92 ERA, 116 WHIP, 4 in the Cy Young list. Got lit up. So, knee-jerk reaction, get out of the card. But also, you know, maybe it balances out. Maybe he actually has an amazing year next year with the same card, and then you average the 2 years together and get numbers like this. Could it just be a year-long slump? It happens. If you don't want to stick with a card, you want to skip 75, where his ERA goes up a run, and get in a 76 Tiant, a 6.3 WAR, and a 3.06 ERA. Similar numbers, 5th in the Cy Young voting. 74 and 76, he's an all-star in those years. Oddly enough, not in the World Series year where he pitched that brilliant World Series game in Fenway. It's kind of Odd how that all worked out. And then in 77 with Boston, we'll start with Dwight Evans. He really doesn't have monster years yet. You know, just destroying years. They come a little later. Kind of a late bloomer, you might say. The 77 season, he is hurt. He only plays 73 games, but he's got an 889 OPS in that year. You see, he's already got the slugging and the walks. And then after that, 78 and 79, there, nothing really is amazing until the 80s. And then the 80s are all Dwight Evans. From 81 to 84, he puts monster years together here. But this 77 card, just because he's got 265 plate appearances, you don't ignore it. It's a 287 average and an 889 OPS. So I like that. However, what I like even more is Jim Rice. Question: has Jim Rice ever had a 1,000 OPS? What do you think before I look it up? 1,000. That's a heck of a number to catch. Has Jim Rice in his entire career done it once? I would say yes, maybe a couple times. When we look at it though, this is really interesting. I never knew this about the Hall of Famer. He never had 1,000 OPS in his career. He came awfully close, 969, 970, 977, then skipped to 83, that monster year, 911. And I think even in 86 maybe, or one of these other years, he's also very good. But never has a 1,000 OPS in his career, mostly because of the walks. He never cracks 60 walks in a season, so that's why that number might come down a little bit. But we've got the monster years approaching of Jim Rice, 77, 8, 9. So this is almost mandatory. You got to jump into the 77 card right away. He's presently, Jim's in his 75 card, which is good. 309, 841. But the 77 card is a 969. You're raising your OPS by 120 points with 39 bombs, leading the league, fourth in MVP votes. So sometimes I just want to remember that, yeah, you got to do that if you're Boston. You got to make your move now to get a World Series team together because, you know, Baltimore is still Baltimore, and then the Yankees are going to come on the horizon, and you're going to get squeezed out, and you're going to have to wait your turn. So I like 77 Rice. I like 76 Burleson, and that's probably don't need to do the other moves for this team. All right, we're halfway through. We'll take a break and be right back. Okay, so next up, after Boston, it's going to be the Expos. Not much going on with the older regime. The older regime sort of just kind of fades away. Jorgens is in his best year. Dave McNally is. Dale Murray, of course, is. One interesting note, Pepe Frias has 15 at-bats and has a Strat-O-Matic card in 1978. And that's like a 750 OPS. So not this year, but next year, when the 78 cards are available, they should jump into that one. I just put a note here now to remind myself of that. It's about the young guys. Gary Carter, Larry Parrish, Jerry White, and Ellis Valentine. Do any of those guys get better? And the answer is, oh yeah. Let's start with the kid, Gary Carter. We want to jump into Gary Carter's 1977 card. He's in a card right now where he can play some outfield and some catcher, and we need to set that straight and just let him play catcher. We don't need him to play multiple positions. So he struggles in 76, but then in 77 he has his Expo high for home runs, 31 of them while in Montreal. A 284, 881 OPS, 5.4 WAR. His WARs continue to get better the next few years. The homer totals go down a little bit. His career high in homers is with the New York Mets in 85. RBIs with the Expos in 84. But we want to get this 77 Gary Carter card with the 31 home runs. That will make a big difference for this team. And then Parrish, it takes a while for him to get going. Jerry White doesn't get much better. But Ellis Valentine also has a nice bit of improvement here. From 76 to 77. He becomes an all-star. And on the MVP list, he goes from 7 homers to 25 home runs. 504 slugging, 835 OPS, almost 100 points better. So this is a case where if none of the other rookies are ready in 77, and that might be a problem, because you have to remember Andre Dawson is coming up soon, as is Warren Cromartie, Charlie Lee, Scott Sanderson. Some of those other Expo players are blooming in 77. If you improve Carter and Valentine, you can't add those other guys to your roster. You can only have 2 guys from 77 in the upcoming season. So maybe it's Carter, and maybe you pump the brakes a bit on Valentine just so you can get Andre Dawson on the team, because you don't have a center fielder right now. You traded him in the offseason. Let's look at the 77 Expos while I got the page up and just see if Andre Dawson there he is. Let's see if he makes a move. He's third on WAR. Yeah, he's a 282 hitting center fielder, and he's the Rookie of the Year. So that answers that question. So I'm just even going to put as a comment that right there that even though Dawson does get better, you're going to have to wait. Again, you got the 76 card of Ellis Valentine, so you got 3 years left with it anyway. You don't have to make the move. But you got to get Dawson on the roster and make Carter a 30 homer hitting catcher next year. All right, next team. California Angels. This is a fun team. This is a team, if you watched my broadcast this summer, I really complained about how the Angels just lacked competitive edge against the Oakland A's out west. And they had to go in the offseason to make some moves. They've made a lot of moves. And they can still make moves within the roster that are interesting as they start to get closer to that late 70s California roster. They traded for Rick Miller from Boston. Didn't give up much to get him either, by the way. And Rick has a nice year in 76 with the Red Sox, I'm going to assume. He doesn't actually get traded to the Angels till much later. He precedes Fred Lynn to the Angels. Fred Lynn gets traded there, I think, in 82. So Rick Miller's with the Angels in 78, but they have him with a 74 card. And in 76, Rick gets 283 with 11 stolen bases. 720 OPS. So that's the highest for him. That might be the card they move him up to if they need to. Another outside note here is that Jim Spencer has extended his stay with the Angels. By this point of his career, he's with Texas, then he would go to the White Sox, then he goes to the Yankees, has that monster 79 for them, finishes up with the Oakland A's. He wins a Gold Glove with the Chicago White Sox in 77. I don't know if that's worth noting now, that maybe in the off-season, Dick Allen might move to the National League after 74 is up. By 1975, Dick Allen's not as good as he once was, and the White Sox acquire Spencer in the offseason to play first base. Next player, Lee Stanton. Right now in 74, he's got a great range and arm in center field. A 2-3, hitting around 260. There's 2 years here for Lee Stanton. One has some offense, one has some defense. So we have a 733 WAR presently. 75, it's a 3.3, and he's up to 14 home runs and a 761 OPS. I don't know what the defense looks like though. If it gets worse, it might not be worth the trouble. I love the defense in center. 2-3 arm. And then 77, it's even significantly worse. Now he's hitting 27 home runs with an 852 OPS. But he's strictly a designated hitter by 77. He's a 4 E16 in the outfield. He's pretty awful. So the question is, do you just want them to swing away, or do you actually want them to play center field for you? I mean, that's what they have to consider. Remember, California got rid of Mickey Rivers to have Lee Stanton play center field for them. And lastly, the next player, and this is probably the most significant move the Angels can make. Frank Tanana goes into the sweet spots of his career in 75, 6, and 7. 76 leads Major League Baseball in WHIP, and 77 is his career best number of WAR. And even 75 is good for Tanana. So they got to pick one of those years, and they're eventually going to go to 77 if they don't do it right away. But all those Frank Tanana cards are exceptional. Mind you, right now he's got a 4.6 WAR with a 3.12 ERA and a 1.26 WHIP. That's fine. You leave him alone. But look what happens. It goes to 110, 098, 108. He's 4th, 3rd, and 9th in Cy Young votes, 15th in the MVP list. The WAR jumps from 4.6 to 7.4, 7.5, 8.3, leads the league in ERA and shutouts in 77. So, I mean, this is what the Angels need to do. He's the ace. He's number 1 at this point. And Nolan Ryan's going to have to settle for number 2. Nolan Ryan's contract is up, and they're going to have to pick a year between 74, 5, 6, and 7 for Ryan. But whatever year they pick for Ryan, it's not going to be better than one of these Tanana years, I'll tell you that. All right, next team. We have 2 more teams to do. The Cubs. The Cubs have Jack Brohammer playing second base. He actually wasn't their property, but they got him. Left-handed hitting second baseman with a little bit of power was nice to have. 74, it's 270, 660 OPS. And we're saying in the 76, he's got a 688 OPS. He's got 7 home runs. Modest improvement. Great bat handler, 44 walks, 28 strikeouts. He also moves from Cleveland to the White Sox. It's kind of a sideways move. They don't have to make it. They could just leave him alone. But this is simply the case of if you're stuck in 76 and you don't have anybody you like in the draft, and you don't want to pick anybody available in the year 76 when it's your time on the clock, you move Brohammer from 74 to 76 to satisfy that need, and then you take a guy from 74 in undrafted free agency. The reason that's effective when you're moving guys out of 74 is whoever you get to replace that year, you're only going to have that guy on your club for that one season. So even if he's not that great a player, the replacement guy, it's not a long-term contract. He's gone at the end of the year. If you remember that example I mentioned about the Dodgers with Sutton and Jim Brewer, they had really bad years in year 1 out of Steve Garvey and Joe Ferguson. That Dodger team decided to do the same thing, improving them. So they tore up those cards, and they moved Garvey into the MVP card of 74, and they moved Ferguson into a better card in 72 or 73. So that's the rationale with the Brohammer. And then in 77, there are 3 guys here, all competing for that improvement. Pretty much should be Bruce Sutter, though. You figure it's got to be Sutter. So he made the club in 76, had like 10 saves. But 77 is that year. Yeah, the ridiculous year of 77. You got to get this one. I can't believe he's 6th on Cy Young voting, that low. That seems very low to me. And he should have been like top 3, but I guess 77 was a good year for pitchers, even though it was a good year for offense. But so it is 77 Sutter that they're going to move into that card. And lastly tonight, the world champ White Sox. Predictably, they like to keep the guys they have where they have them. Ken Anderson's in his best year in 74, as is George Orta. Forster has a pretty modest middle 70s. None of these years is particularly that great. They're going to stick with him. Garman, 74 and 75 are about the same. Bart Johnson's best year, only good year really, is 74. Jim Cott, you can give him a 1-year contract extension now so that you don't have to put him on the keeper list next year, because his 75 is as good as 74. It wins 20 games both years. Brian Downing is an interesting case. We know he's got an injury that limits his throwing. I mean, his 75 card that we have, we like a lot because he has the on base, he's got some power, he's got a -1 arm. He's got a 3.5 WAR, yet he hits 240. That's really good, all things. And he would not get a better WAR than that until, of course, 1979, when he's on the California Angels. More of a DH than he is a catcher, hitting 326, 880. But this is after the White Sox realized that he can't be behind the plate very effectively anymore. But in 77, in just 69 games, Strat-O-Matic prints this card. It's a 284, 402 on base, 804 OPS. So he doesn't have the power anymore, but he's drawing a ton of walks, and he's hitting for a higher average. So the White Sox have to figure out, do you want to give up that throwing arm he has in 75 for more on base in 77? The last few guys on the team, we know Gossage is where he needs to be in the year of 75. Lamar Johnson breaks onto the scene in 76 with his best year and never gets any better, really. And Bonson's in his last good year of 76 with Oakland. So not a lot of improvements for the White Sox, which makes sense because they're already happy with their guys. That'll do it tonight. We've looked at 8 teams, and we'll be picking this up next week with the next 8 teams on the list of carry-on players. Thanks for checking this out. We'll see you next week.